friends, and welcome back to another Before You Read lecture. This is our final lecture in our study of the book of Job as a part of our broader series exploring Israel's wisdom tradition. This lecture will focus on Job chapters 38 through 42. The material in these chapters is pretty easy to describe. There are a couple of elements. The first, and probably the most significant, is the speech of God from a whirlwind. That we see in chapters 38 verse 1 through 40 verse 2, and again in chapter 40 verse 6 through 41:34. So God gets a pretty significant speaking part in this part of the book of Job. Certainly, God's speech, God's response, is not nearly as long as all of the human words in Job. And yet, as you read through it, you realize just how significant, how powerful these words of God are. And so, in between these two speeches of God, we see Job respond. Twice Job responds. And then God speaks a third time, and this time speaks to Job's friends. That occurs in 42 verses 7 through 9. And then in the very end of the book, chapter 42 verses 10 through 17, this is the closing frame in the book of Job that I've mentioned earlier in the lectures. This is the narrative frame that closes the material. So again, just a brief outline. I've already sort of gestured to it, but for your reference, God's first response can be found in Job 38:1 through 40 verse 2. Then we see a very short response in Job 40 verses 3 through 5. God speaks again for a second time in Job chapter 40 verse 6 through 41:34. Job is said to respond in chapter 42 verses 1 through 6. Then in verses 42, 7 through 9, God speaks to Job's friends. And then the story ends in Job 42, 10 through 17. When it comes to reading this material, I think one of the things you're going to notice straight away is the use of rhetorical questions in the speech of God. You're going to see God speak directly to Job through questions like, "Were you there?" or "Do you know?" or "Can you do such and such?" And I think the expected answer to all of these questions is an emphatic no. Job was not there when the world was created. Job does not know the circuits of the clouds or of the stars. Job is not able to contain Leviathan or Behemoth. So these questions and these rapid fire questions are important. The rhetorical nature of them are important. And so my first question to you as you read is, can you discern any logic or progression in the series of questions that God asks Job? Is there anything that holds them together? Do you see any sort of structure or progression among them? My second question for you to consider as you read these chapters is, what do you think the intended effect or purpose of God's rapid fire questions is? What is God hoping to do? Is it to simply put Job in his place, to humiliate him? Is it to educate Job about the nature or the mystery of God? What is the purpose of these questions? A third question is in God's speech to Job's friends in chapter 42. God says that Job has spoken correctly about God, unlike Job's friends. And so a third question for you would be, when did Job speak rightly about God? When in the narrative has Job done that, do you think? And then My fourth question is, as you consider the sort of happy ending nature of the book of Job in chapter 42, verses 10 through 17, I wonder, is the story resolved? Is Job's story resolved? Is his wrestling with the righteousness and power and goodness of God resolved? Or does the story leave you wanting more? Is it more open-ended than that? All right, friends, a short lecture for a short section from the book of Job. My guess is, though, that the material here, and certainly these guiding questions, will give us plenty to discuss. Happy reading.